The crystal water glass exploded against the polished marble, shards glittering like deadly confetti under the ballroom's chandeliers. Bianca Romano felt the shock of impact before the pain registered, her vision blurring as Linda Williams's palm connected with her cheek. The sharp cracks silenced 300 of the city's most powerful elite mid-conversation, mid-laugh, mid-breath. "Clumsy little fool," Linda spat, her 4-carat engagement ring catching the light as she drew back for another strike. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This dress costs more than you'll make in a year." But Bianca's hand wasn't rising to shield her face. It flew instinctively to her stomach, clutching the subtle curve hidden beneath her catering uniform, a protective gesture born of pure maternal terror. Her knees buckled slightly, pain radiating through her abdomen as she struggled to stay upright. The room held its collective breath. Linda was still speaking, still gesturing wildly at the small wine stain on her ivory gown, still performing her outrage for an audience that no longer mattered. But she hadn't noticed yet. Hadn't seen what everyone else had suddenly realized with cold, creeping dread. Sergio Romano had gone utterly still. The Mafia boss wasn't looking at his fiancée's designer dress or her theatrical fury. His obsidian eyes were locked on the young woman stumbling backward, on the protective hand cradling something precious, on the terror and pain etched across features that held an impossible, haunting familiarity. His expression was blank as winter stone, which somehow made him more terrifying than rage ever could. The temperature in the ballroom seemed to drop 10 degrees, though not a single window had been opened. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. 3 hours earlier. Bianca Romano stared at her reflection in the staff locker room mirror, adjusting her black catering vest for the 3rd time. Her dark curls were scraped back into a ruthlessly tight bun, and she'd skipped makeup entirely except for concealer to hide the exhaustion beneath her eyes. Professional. Invisible. Forgettable. Exactly what someone working the Romano family's annual charity gala needed to be. Her phone buzzed against the metal bench. A text from her roommate, Sarah. "Rent's due Friday. You good?" Bianca's throat tightened. She wasn't good. She was 5 months pregnant, alone, and $200 short even with tonight's catering fee. The baby's father had made his position crystal clear when she told him, "Not my problem. I'll have it." "Thanks for the reminder," she typed back, each word a small act of faith she didn't quite feel. She placed one hand on her stomach, feeling the gentle flutter of movement beneath her palm. "We're going to be okay," she whispered to the tiny life growing inside her. "Mama's going to figure this out." Romano. Bianca jumped as Gerald, the catering manager, stuck his head through the door. His expression was harried, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Listen carefully." One of the servers called in sick. "You're being pulled from kitchen duty to work the main ballroom. VIP guests only." He thrust a serving tray into her hands. "Do not mess this up. Do not draw attention to yourself. Do not, and I cannot stress this enough, interact with the family unless directly spoken to. Understood?" Bianca's stomach dropped. The main ballroom meant exposure. It meant being seen. The Romano family wasn't just wealthy, they were the city's most powerful crime dynasty, and their annual gala was where alliances were forged and enemies were identified. "I've got this," she said, forcing confidence into her voice. But her hands trembled as she balanced the tray. The service elevator to the main floor felt like a descent into another world. As the doors slid open, Bianca was hit with a wall of sound, crystal glasses clinking, string quartet music floating over conversations conducted in hushed, powerful tones. The ballroom was a cathedral of wealth, all soaring ceilings and marble columns, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city skyline. And there, commanding the center of the room like a dark sun around which everything else orbited, was Sergio Romano. He was taller than she'd imagined from the newspaper photos, broader in the shoulders, more intimidating in person. His tailored black suit fit him like a second skin, and his presence was so absolute that people seemed to unconsciously move aside as he walked. His face was all sharp angles and controlled danger, strong jaw, prominent cheekbones, and eyes the color of polished onyx that missed nothing. He didn't look at her. Men like Sergio Romano didn't see the help. Beside him, draped on his arm like a trophy, was Linda Williams. The woman was everything Bianca was not: tall, blonde, perfectly composed in a designer gown that probably cost more than 6 months of Bianca's rent. Her laugh was bright and performative, her gestures calculated to draw attention. She touched Sergio's chest possessively, leaned in to whisper in his ear, marked her territory with every movement. Bianca felt herself shrinking instinctively, making herself smaller as she wove between tables with her tray of champagne flutes. This was Linda Williams's world. These were her people. Bianca was just passing through, trying not to shatter anything on her way to survival. She had no way of knowing that in less than an hour, everything would shatter anyway. Bianca's fingers ached as she tied the black apron around her waist for the third time, trying to position the knot so it wouldn't press against her stomach. 5 months pregnant, and she was still small enough that the uniform mostly hid it, as long as she didn't turn sideways, didn't breathe too deeply, didn't draw attention to the gentle swell that had become her entire world. The staff kitchen of the Romano estate was chaos incarnate. Caterers rushed past with trays of hors d'oeuvres that cost more than her weekly grocery budget, barking orders in Italian and English, their faces slick with stress sweat. Gerald had made his expectations brutally clear: stay in the kitchen, prep the backup trays, keep your head down, and for the love of God, don't go anywhere near the ballroom unless explicitly ordered. She had no intention of disobeying. The less she was seen, the better. Through the service entrance, she caught glimpses of the world she'd never belonged to. Women in gowns that moved like liquid silk. Men in suits that probably cost more than her car. The ballroom beyond was a temple to wealth and power, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. The string quartet's music drifted through the doorway, hauntingly beautiful, almost mocking in its elegance. Bianca kept her eyes on her work, arranging canapés with shaking hands. The baby kicked, a gentle flutter against her ribs, and she pressed her palm there reflexively. Soon, she whispered. Just get through tonight, and we're $200 closer. But then she saw him. Sergio Romano moved through the crowd like a predator among prey, his presence so absolute that conversation stuttered when he passed. He was younger than she'd expected from the grainy newspaper photos, maybe 35, with the kind of face that belonged on Roman coins. Sharp. Ruthless. Utterly cold. His black suit fit him like armor, and his dark eyes swept the room with the casual assessment of a man who owned everything he surveyed. On his arm, Linda Williams laughed at something he'd said, her blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo, diamonds glittering at her throat like a collar of stars. She touched his chest possessively, leaned into him with practiced intimacy, her red lips curved in a smile that announced her victory to every woman in the room. Bianca looked away quickly, her heart hammering. These people weren't just wealthy. They were untouchable. Dangerous. The kind of power that crushed people like her without even noticing. She retreated deeper into the kitchen, making herself invisible, trying to ignore the sick certainty settling in her stomach that tonight was going to change everything. Bianca was refilling the champagne station when Gerald appeared at her elbow, his face pale and pinched with anxiety. Table 7 needs immediate service. The fiancé specifically requested a server. His eyes darted toward the ballroom center, where Linda Williams held court like a queen among her subjects. "Do not make me regret pulling you from the kitchen." The tray felt impossibly heavy in Bianca's hands as she navigated the crowd, her heart climbing into her throat with each step. She could hear Linda's voice before she saw her, bright, cutting, designed to carry across the room. The woman was magnificent in her fury, gesturing animatedly as she spoke to Sergio, who stood with his arms crossed, his expression carved from granite. "I don't care what Marco thinks," Linda was saying, her voice rising. "This is our engagement party, Sergio, and I will not be." She stepped backward without looking, her heel connecting with Bianca's shin. Bianca stumbled, the tray tilting dangerously. Red wine sloshed over the rim of a crystal glass, arcing through the air in slow motion. She twisted desperately, managing to redirect the trajectory. The crimson liquid splashed across the marble floor instead of Linda's ivory gown, missing the hem by mere inches. The glasses clattered against the tray. One shattered. The sound cut through the ballroom like a blade. Linda whirled around, her eyes wide with shock that quickly crystallized into cold rage. "Are you insane?" she shrieked. "Do you have any idea what you almost did?" "I'm so sorry, ma'am," Bianca stammered, setting the tray down with shaking hands. "You stepped back and I couldn't. Don't you dare blame me for your incompetence." Linda's voice climbed an octave, drawing every eye in the vicinity. "Look at this mess. You could have ruined everything. This dress cost $30,000. Bianca's hands went to her apron, automatically reaching for something to clean the spill, and she felt it, the delicate chain around her neck snapping under the pressure of her fumbling fingers. Her mother's gold locket tumbled free, hitting the marble with a soft clink that only she seemed to hear. "I didn't mean." "You never mean to, do you people?" Linda's face was flushed, her perfectly composed mask cracking. "Clumsy, careless, utterly beneath contempt. Someone like you shouldn't even be allowed in here." Bianca bent to retrieve the locket, her vision blurring with humiliation, unaware that Sergio Romano had turned his full attention to the scene unfolding at his feet. Linda's voice rose to a pitch that silenced the entire ballroom, her carefully cultivated society veneer shattering completely. "You absolute fool. Do you know who I am? Do you have any concept of what you've done?" Bianca straightened slowly, her mother's locket clutched in her palm, trying to make herself smaller. "Ma'am, I apologize. It was an accident." "An accident?" Linda laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "No, this is what happens when they let just anyone work these events. Look at you, you can barely hold a tray steady. Clumsy, worthless little." "Linda." Sergio's voice was quiet, almost gentle. A warning that Linda was too far gone to hear. "No, Sergio, this is exactly the problem." Linda gestured wildly at Bianca, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "This is why standards matter. These people come in here, they take jobs they're not qualified for, and then they ruin everything they touch. She's filth. Complete and utter." The word hung in the air like poison. Bianca felt something inside her crack. 5 months of fear, of working herself to exhaustion, of being invisible and grateful for it, all of it condensed into one burning moment of defiance. She lifted her chin, meeting Linda's eyes directly for the first time. "I said I was sorry." Linda's hand moved faster than thought. The slap connected with Bianca's cheek with a sharp crack that echoed off the marble columns like a gunshot. Pain exploded across her face, white-hot and shocking. But worse, infinitely worse, was the way the force of it knocked her sideways, sent her stumbling backward, her body twisting to protect what mattered most. Her hands flew to her stomach instinctively, pressing against the gentle swell hidden beneath her uniform. A sharp, pulling sensation radiated through her abdomen, and terror, primal, absolute terror, flooded her system. The baby. Oh God, the baby. She didn't hear the collective gasp from the crowd. Didn't see Linda's hands still raised, frozen in shock at her own violence. Didn't register the sudden movement at the edge of her vision. All she could focus on was the pain and the fear and the protective curve of her own body bent around her unborn child. But Sergio Romano saw everything. He saw the way her hands cradled her stomach. Saw the unmistakable curve that the motion revealed. Saw the primal fear in her eyes, not fear of Linda, but fear for something infinitely more precious. And he saw, in the stark light of the chandeliers, the exact shape of her face. The same face that stared back at him from his mother's photograph every morning. Enough. The single word cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Sergio's voice was barely above a whisper, yet every conversation in the ballroom died instantly. He moved forward with the controlled grace of a man who had perfected violence into an art form, his eyes never leaving Bianca's hunched, trembling form. Sergio, Linda began, her voice faltering. I said enough. He didn't look at his fiancée. Didn't acknowledge her existence. His entire focus was on the young woman struggling to breathe through her panic. Marco. A man materialized from the shadows near the doorway, broad-shouldered and alert. Boss. Take her to the private medical suite. Now. Have Dr. Chen examine her immediately. Sergio's tone was arctic cold, the kind of calm that preceded executions. No one, and I mean no one, leaves this ballroom until I say otherwise. Marco moved swiftly, approaching Bianca with surprising gentleness. Miss, can you walk? Bianca nodded mutely, her hands still pressed protectively against her stomach. She allowed herself to be guided toward the service exit, her legs unsteady, her mind reeling. Behind her, she could hear Linda's voice rising in protest, could feel 300 pairs of eyes boring into her back. Sergio watched her go, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he turned his attention to the marble floor where the incident had occurred. Shattered crystal. A dark stain of spilled wine spreading like blood. And there, catching the light of the chandelier above, a small gold object. He bent down, his movement deliberate, and picked up the locket. It was old, the kind passed down through generations, with intricate engravings that had been worn smooth by decades of handling. He turned it over in his palm, and his blood turned to ice. Engraved on the back, in script so familiar it hurt, Br. His hands moved without conscious thought, opening the delicate clasp. Inside, a photograph, faded with age, the edges worn from being touched too many times. A young woman with dark curls and warm eyes smiled out at him from across the years. His mother. Sergio had an identical locket in his safe. His mother had commissioned 2 before she died, one for him, one for his baby sister. The sister who had disappeared during a hit 20 years ago. The sister they'd buried an empty coffin for because they never found her body. The sister he'd believed was dead. His fingers closed around the locket, and something inside his chest, something he'd thought had calcified into stone years ago, cracked wide open. Sergio stood motionless in the ballroom, the locket burning like a brand against his palm, when Marco's voice crackled through his earpiece. Boss, the doctors finished the preliminary exam. The girl's stable. Baby's fine. But you need to know, her ID says Bianca Romano. 23 years old. No family listed. Romano. The room tilted slightly, though Sergio's expression never changed. 23. That would make her exactly the right age. His sister had been 3 when she disappeared during the ambush that killed their mother. The police had found blood but no body. His father had spent a fortune searching for months before finally accepting what seemed inevitable. But if she'd survived, if someone had taken her, hidden her, raised her under a different name only to have her end up back here, working under his own roof. "Keep her there," Sergio said quietly into his collar mic, "I'm coming." He turned, and his eyes found Linda immediately. She was surrounded by a cluster of concerned socialites, playing the victim with practiced expertise, her voice carrying across the room in breathless fragments. So frightening, these people, completely unhinged. Linda. Her name left his mouth like a verdict. She turned, relief flooding her face. "Sergio, thank God. Did you see how that girl attacked me? We need to press charges, make an example. Leave us." The command wasn't directed at Linda. It was for everyone else. The crowd melted away like smoke, their survival instincts finely tuned after years of navigating Romano power dynamics. Linda's smile faltered. "Sergio, what?" "Her name is Bianca Romano." He held up the locket, watching Linda's face carefully. "She's 23 years old. 5 months pregnant. And you just struck her hard enough to endanger both her and her child. I don't understand what you're—" "She's my sister." The words came out flat, emotionless, which made them infinitely more terrifying. "My baby sister, who I thought died 20 years ago. And you," his voice dropped to a whisper that promised violence, "you dared to strike my blood." Linda's face went white. "Sergio, I didn't know. How could I possibly? The engagement is over. The alliance with your family is over. Marco will escort you to collect your belongings from my home." He stepped closer, and Linda instinctively backed away. "You have 48 hours to leave the city. If I see you after that, if I even hear your name spoken in my presence, I will forget that my mother raised me to show mercy to women. You can't just—" "I can." His smile was colder than winter. "And I have." The compound was a fortress disguised as a mansion, all high walls and surveillance cameras hidden among manicured gardens. Bianca's new quarters occupied an entire wing, bedroom, sitting room, private bathroom, each space larger than her entire former apartment. The bed alone could have slept 4 people comfortably. She sat on its edge now, 3 days after the gala, still trying to process the impossible truth Sergio had laid before her. Sister. Family. Protection. Words that felt like a foreign language on her tongue. Sergio himself was a ghost in her new life, present but distant, watching her with those unreadable dark eyes during brief, formal dinners where conversation died in her throat. He'd explained their shared history with clinical precision: the ambush, their mother's death, her disappearance into foster care under an assumed identity that had somehow, impossibly, reverted to Romano. He'd shown her photographs, documents, the matching locket that proved everything. But proof didn't erase the fact that he terrified her. Marco, however, was different. He appeared each morning with breakfast, not the elaborate spreads the kitchen staff prepared, but simple things. Toast with the crusts cut off. Ginger tea that settled her morning nausea. Orange slices arranged on a small plate. He never commented on her pregnancy, never asked invasive questions, simply ensured she had what she needed and disappeared like smoke. On the 4th day, Bianca woke shivering to find the room inexplicably warm, the thermostat adjusted from its previous 68 degrees to a comfortable 72. Marco was repositioning a space heater near her reading chair, his movements economical and quiet. "You were cold last night," he said simply, not looking at her. "I heard you mention it to the housekeeper." "You didn't have to." The boss wants you comfortable. But the way he said it suggested the motivation was more personal than professional duty. She started noticing other things. The prenatal vitamins that appeared on her nightstand. The pregnancy pillow that materialized on her bed. The library books about childbirth and infant care stacked neatly on her desk, each one carefully selected, nothing overwhelming or frightening. Marco never took credit. Never sought acknowledgement. But Bianca began to understand that while Sergio provided safety through power and fear, Marco provided something more fundamental. He saw her not as a lost sister to be protected or a liability to be managed, but as a woman, scared, alone, and desperately in need of someone who simply cared. It was dangerous, this growing warmth in her chest whenever he entered the room. But for the first time in months, she felt truly seen. The email arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, clinical in its brutality. The biological father's lawyer had made his client's position abundantly clear. He wanted no parental rights, no contact, no involvement whatsoever. He'd signed away any claim to the child, effective immediately. There was a check enclosed, enough to make Bianca's hands shake, with a single condition: she never contact him again. Bianca sat in the garden courtyard, the printed pages trembling in her grip, and felt something inside her finally break. Not her heart, that had cracked months ago when he'd walked away. This was deeper. The last fragile hope that her child might have a father, that she wouldn't be doing this completely alone, that someone besides her might love this baby. She didn't hear Marco approach until he was kneeling in front of her chair, his face creased with concern. Bianca. What happened? She couldn't speak. Could only hand him the papers and watch his expression darken as he read, his jaw tightening with barely controlled anger. He's a coward, Marco said finally, his voice rough. And a fool. He's right though, isn't he? The words spilled out before she could stop them. I'm alone. I have nothing to offer this baby except a borrowed room in a crime boss's house and a brother who looks at me like I'm a ghost he can't decide whether to mourn or fear. Stop. Marco's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. You are not alone. Do you understand me? You are not. His words died as their eyes met, as the careful distance he'd maintained for 2 weeks collapsed under the weight of everything unspoken between them. Bianca saw it then, not duty or professional obligation, but raw, desperate want. Marco, she whispered. A warning. A plea. He kissed her like a man who knew he was signing his own death warrant but couldn't stop himself. His hands were gentle despite the fierceness of his mouth against hers, cradling her face like she was something infinitely precious. Bianca kissed him back with equal desperation, her fingers tangling in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the reality settled between them like a blade. If Sergio finds out, Bianca started. I know. Marco's forehead rested against hers, his voice barely audible. He'll kill me. But God help me, Bianca, I don't care. I do, she whispered fiercely. I care. Sergio returned from his business in the city with blood on his cufflinks and ice in his eyes. Bianca saw him first through the library window, watching as he emerged from the black SUV with that predatory grace that made her instinctively step back even though 2 floors and thick glass separated them. At dinner that night, the air felt different. Charged. Sergio watched them with the attention of a man reading a ledger, his gaze moving between Bianca and Marco with calculating precision. When Marco refilled her water glass without being asked, Sergio's eyes narrowed fractionally. When Bianca smiled, actually smiled, something small and genuine, at something Marco murmured about the overcooked vegetables, Sergio's fork paused midway to his mouth. Marco, Sergio said, his voice conversational. I need you in Naples tomorrow. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marco's expression never changed. Of course, boss. What's the assignment? Lorenzo Vitali has been skimming from our shipments. He's holed up in his compound with 30 men. Sergio took a sip of wine, casual as discussing the weather. I need you to deliver a message. Personally. Bianca's blood turned to ice. She'd heard enough whispered conversations among the household staff to know what that meant. Vitali's compound was a death trap. 30 armed men against one. The message wouldn't be delivered. Marco would be sending it with his last breath. When do I leave? Marco asked, his voice perfectly steady. Dawn. Sergio's eyes found Bianca's across the table. You'll be gone approximately 2 weeks. If you survive the initial meeting. Bianca's hands clenched beneath the table, her nails biting into her palms. She saw it clearly now, this wasn't about Vitali. This was a test. Sergio knew. Maybe not the details, but he'd sensed the shift between them, and this was his verdict. Understood, Marco said. He didn't look at Bianca. Didn't betray even a flicker of emotion. But that night, when Marco came to say goodbye, Bianca was waiting in the hallway outside her room. His eyes widened in alarm. You can't be here. I won't let you die for me, she said fiercely. I won't watch you walk into that compound knowing Sergio sent you there because of what we are to each other. Bianca. I'm going to tell him. Her voice shook but held firm. Tomorrow morning, before you leave. I'm going to tell him everything. Bianca found Sergio in his study at dawn, the room thick with cigar smoke and the weight of decisions made in darkness. He looked up as she entered without knocking, his expression unreadable. You should be resting, he said. The baby. Marco didn't touch me without my consent. The words came out steady, stronger than she felt. And he didn't pursue me. I kissed him first. Whatever punishment you're planning, it falls on me, not him. Sergio's eyes were obsidian in the dim light. You think you understand what you're asking me to overlook? I'm not asking. Bianca stepped closer, her hand instinctively covering her stomach. I'm telling you. Marco has protected me with his life. He's seen me as a woman, not just a liability or a ghost of your dead sister. He's cared for me when I was invisible to everyone else, including you. He violated protocol. Broke a sacred rule of this family. He loved me. Her voice cracked on the word. And I love him. So if you're going to punish someone, punish me. Send me away. But don't you dare send him to die in Naples because you can't accept that your sister is a person with her own heart. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Then Sergio stood, moving to the window overlooking the compound grounds. In the courtyard below, Marco waited beside the SUV, his bags already loaded, prepared to drive toward his own execution without question. He accepted the mission, Sergio said quietly. Didn't hesitate. Didn't bargain. Didn't betray you even to save his own life. That's why I love him. Sergio turned, and for the first time since she'd met him, Bianca saw something other than ice in her brother's eyes. Something that might have been grief, or recognition, or the painful acknowledgement of his own capacity for mercy. Our mother would have hated what I've become, he said. She believed in family above everything. Even above honor. Even above the rules I've killed men for breaking. He pressed a button on his desk. Cancel the Naples assignment. Send Marco to my study. When Marco entered 5 minutes later, his face was carefully blank, prepared for death. Instead, Sergio gestured to the chair beside Bianca. "Kneel," Sergio commanded. Marco dropped to one knee, his eyes never leaving Sergio's face. "You will marry my sister within the month. You will raise her child as your own. You will protect them both with your life, and if you ever betray that oath, I will make your death last days." Marco's voice was hoarse. "I swear it." Sergio's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then welcome to the family. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you felt it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt this story was really worth listening to, click the super thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us continue creating stories that touch the soul.